What is the best and worst retro music track in every Mario Kart game? To answer that, we're going to start with Super Circuit since the first two games don't have any retro tracks. Super Circuit contains every single course from Super Mario Kart as unlockable retro content, and this was before retro tracks were really a feature and Nintendo had figured out that people would love this. This game just casually added every single track from that game. However, none of them are remixed, they sound pretty much the same, but the GBA audio is obviously a little bit different, so they don't sound exactly the same. So the best and worst here is really just about which tracks survived the move and which ones didn't, because like I said, there's not much different here. My favorite in Super was Donut Plains, but I'm actually going to go with a different pick here and say SNES Koopa Beach. It wasn't my favorite in Super Mario Kart, but I don't know, the GBA does something to this one that works really well. There's a relaxed quality to it on this hardware, almost like a Pokemon feel. Feels very breezy, low stakes. The GBA kind of has a warmth to certain instruments that the SNES didn't quite have, and Koopa Beach benefits from that more than anything else in the lineup. Vanilla Lake also came through fine, nothing got mangled in the move, which cannot be said for a later handheld console that begins with a D and ends with an S, but we'll get to that later. The worst here is still SNES Ghost Valley. I already talked about this in my last video, but this is just a remix of the Boo House theme from Super Mario World, and it just does not fit Mario Kart, and nothing about moving to a GBA fixes that. Just the slow, grating, haunted house music in a racing game. The GBA actually just softened it slightly, but the problem is the same problem it's always been. Now, I do want to give a quick disclaimer before I continue, and it should be obvious, but these are all just my personal opinions. These are not meant to be objective. Nah, just kidding. If you disagree with me, it's not because you have your own personal preference when it comes to music. You must agree with every single pick here, and not picking my favorite track as your favorite is criminal. Alright, moving on. So Double Dash actually has no retro tracks and the entire soundtrack is original, which makes it the only post-Super Circuit entry where that's true. What's funny though is that Double Dash became one of the most borrowed from games in the entire series. Like think about Mushroom Bridge, Baby Park, Waluigi Stadium. All of them have returned more times than you returned to Nintendo after saying you were done with them. Anyway, the first game to officially have retro tracks was Mario Kart DS. DS is my first game in the series and I first played it when I was like 4, so the first time I was hearing all these retro tracks, I had nothing to compare them against. There's 16 retro courses across 4 game eras, and some of them are close to the originals while others have that specific DS quality that changes how they feel entirely. I mention this every video, but the DS sound chip just does what the DS sound chip does, and it's pure nostalgia for anyone my age. But for the first time in the series, there are more notable differences in these classic tracks, and when I say more notable, I mean slightly notable because they are still very much similar. My favorite here is GameCube Mushroom Bridge. I love the Double Dash original, and while this version isn't a huge departure, the DS hardware does something to it I find hard to name, but easy to hear, if that makes sense. The bass line hits differently, and there's a synth layer that makes the whole thing feel more urgent. It kind of feels like a Wario track. Sky Garden GBA also sounds great here. The original is good, and this version just keeps all of it without trying to fix what wasn't broken. Now, famously, some of the DS retro tracks did not survive the transition quite as well. In my previous video where I went over the worst tracks in every Mario Kart game, and by the way, be sure to subscribe and check that out after, there were a few comments about some of the retro tracks in that game, and I was just including originals there, but since the entire purpose of this video is to look at retro tracks, I finally get an opportunity to talk about them. My least favorite here is Banshee Boardwalk. And I need to get something out of the way first because I've gotten a few comments like this, but I do like some of the spooky Mario Kart music. I don't like all of them, but some of them just feel too slow and too ominous without having anything that really sounds good to listen to. Like if it's the vibe of the track, sure, but I'm just basing this on how I enjoy listening to something. But even so, Banshee Boardwalk has never worked for me in any version, and the DS one takes whatever I disliked about the 64 one and just amplifies it. The percussion is actively uncomfortable, there's no melody, it just sounds like background noise from a completely different game. I actually came out of this project disliking it more than when I went in. If you have a version of this track that actually works for you, I'm curious, drop it in the comments because I just want to understand what I'm missing. And I gotta give a dishonorable mention to Bowser's Castle 2 from Super Circuit. There's a distorted guitar sample in the track that sounds like the microphone broke during recording and someone kept the take anyway. The Super Circuit original was fine, but this version is not fine. I just have no idea what happened here, and this would have been the obvious pick if it wasn't for Banshee Boardwalk. The thing about Wii's retro tracks is that the selection itself is well chosen. You get Delfino Square, which is relaxed and atmospheric. You get Waluigi Stadium, which has the loud and chaotic feel. You get DK Mountain, Peach Beach. There's a lot of range over those 16 courses, but the problem isn't the choices, it's that most of these versions just don't go anywhere beyond what better hardware alone explains. Wii audio is cleaner than DS, so everything sounds cleaner, but that's kind of as far as it goes. You might be waiting for a version that does something new with the material, and it doesn't really show up much. A cleaner version of something is still good, but compared to what's coming later, it's a noticeable ceiling. My favorite here is DS Delfino Square. The DS original is one of my favorites from that whole game. Just has a very relaxed, vacation-y quality that I've always loved listening to. And like I mentioned, Waluigi Stadium from Double Dash also shows up here, sounding nearly identical to the original, but the original is great, so that works out fine here. The worst is DS Desert Hills. This one actually surprised me a bit because I actually like Desert Hills on the DS. Like, if you watch my last video, you'll remember I didn't pick this as my least favorite. But side by side with the Wii version, just something feels slightly off, and I can't fully pin down what. Maybe familiarity, maybe the DS compression gave the original something that just sounds better. I don't know, I kept going back to this and just something here sounded off. Ghost Valley is in this game too though, and I didn't pick it again just because that would have been boring. 7 is interesting because the retro track conversation here is really about what the 3DS hardware could do that the DS couldn't. The DS very much still had that retro sounding audio quality where it all sounded compressed, and it's fine for some tracks but really limited some others. The 3DS gave the composers a lot more room for a handheld game in the series, so the gap between the retro versions and the originals isn't dramatic here, but I feel like it's more consistent than the Wii. Like, it doesn't have as clean audio as the Wii, but it's not that big of a difference. But there's a few versions here that I feel like try to do at least something different. Coconut Mall is my pick here. And I know that's not a bold call at all. I mean, it's Coconut Mall, it's my favorite in Wii. But it actually has some changes here. It actually has slightly different instrument levels, and I love this track in every version. And there's a bunch of other great ones here from Wii, DS, other games, Mushroom Gorge. Waluigi Pinball. An Airship Fortress from DS. 7 just has a really strong retro lineup. The worst is SNES Mario Circuit 2. There's like a frequency or an instrument balance in the mix that just doesn't sit right with me, and I've put this on enough times now that I know I'm not imagining it. The original isn't really a notable track, but it's fine. But this version takes something I was already neutral on and then really makes me kind of dislike it. I don't think it's horrendous or anything, but it's my pick here. Alright, this is the one a lot of you probably skipped to, and if you did skip to this part of the video, I just want to say subscribe because I predicted what you did. But anyway, everything before the section is about what tracks survived being moved to new hardware. Mario Kart 8 is different though. What 8 does with retro tracks is treats them like they're worth arranging live instrumentation, real production for them, actually building them into something new rather than just polishing or slightly changing up an existing version. The result is a retro track selection that's more often than not just better than the originals. Coconut Mall and Wii and Coconut Mall and 8 Deluxe sound like different songs. Waluigi Pinball sounds enormous, and 64 Rainbow Road sounds the way it was always supposed to sound. It's a lot to take in when you've had these songs in your head for years, and suddenly they're just grander than you remembered. Then the Booster Course Pass came along and added tracks from basically every game in the series on top of what was already there. The amount of retro content in this game is unreasonable in the best way. So before I get to the overall best and worst, I actually want to run through a quick pick from each era. For the SNES, Donut Plains. The original is a nice track, but hearing it in 8 Deluxe is just a completely different experience. Going back after this version feels like a step down, and yeah, it's kind of unfair to compare a Wii U/Switch game to an SNES game, but it doesn't change the fact that it's just so much better here. For then 64, Rainbow Road. I talked about the 64 original at length in my best tracks video. It has a sort of common quality that really works. And then the 8 Deluxe version just keeps that feeling and just scales it. The orchestra here is just perfection. Now onto the GameCube, I'm gonna go with a controversial one, Baby Park. Waluigi Stadium is also here and excellent, and I know someone is going to say I picked wrong. Whatever you think I should have picked, someone else thinks it's criminal I didn't choose their favorite over yours, and neither people agree with each other anyway. We're all going to lose this argument, but for me, Baby Park with a live guitar and the fuller sound is just something that I love. Onto the Game Boy Advance, it's Sky Garden. This is actually a quietly good track in each game it's in, and 8 Deluxe, of course, like all the other tracks, just makes it so much better. The DS for me is Waluigi Pinball. Same track, but now with that stadium feel. Like, this makes it feel like you're actually part of a living stadium where there's a bunch of people in the stands. For the Wii, Wario's Goldmine. So I've already talked about Coconut Mall enough across these videos, and Wario's Goldmine sounds even better here than it already did, and it was already amazing. Onto the 3DS, I had to go with Rainbow Road. It's probably my favorite version of Rainbow Road in the entire series, and it just sounds so much fuller here. And finally, Mario Kart Tour, I'm going with New York Minute. Yoshi's Island is technically already a retro track within Tour itself, and I've talked about it enough elsewhere that I want to give something else a turn. New York Minute's actually a pretty solid track that I don't hear many people talk about. Now, what is my favorite out of all of these? I honestly don't know, and I'm probably going to change my mind as soon as I write this, but I really love how the 3DS Rainbow Road version sounds. But now we have to get to a worst tier, and I'm going with Tour Los Angeles Laps. I did not like it in Tour, I do not like it here. I've never been a fan of the melody, and it keeps feeling like the song's about to start, but never really lives up to its potential. When you're competing against all these other fantastic retro tracks, this was a very easy pick for me. Now, speaking of Tour, Mario Kart Tour probably has more retro content than original music now, and I've already talked about a lot of these tracks throughout this video and my previous ones, so I'm just going to try to pick something that hasn't come up yet. A lot of those end up being GBA tracks, and I think the Game Boy Advance music fits Tour better than you'd expect. For the best, keeping it to things we haven't covered, Game Boy Advance Snowland. It sounds like a Christmas song, and I mean that in a compliment. It's very warm, or cold, I guess, easy to sit with, and just has the Game Boy Advance winter level quality that I just love from that era. Just makes me think of December. The worst here is Game Boy Advance Blue Lake. The chime sounds in the background are way too prominent in the mix, and the main melodic instrument, I cannot tell you what it is, has this very uncomfortable frequency range. It makes the whole thing feel less like a haunted course theme and more like something is just actually wrong. Not like spooky wrong, just wrong. It's never really been a course I've liked in any game, so it's gonna be my pick here. Home Circuit doesn't have retro tracks in the traditional sense. What it has, though, is full arrangements of existing Mario Kart music. Most retro tracks are the same song in different hardware. These were rebuilt. For anyone who missed it, Home Circuit came out in 2020 and used your phone camera to lay a Mario Kart course on top of a physical track you built in your house out of cardboard pieces. Like you drive an actual RC car around your living room while racing against virtual opponents on screen. So as you would probably expect, it doesn't have too many original tracks, and it does reuse a lot from the series. So for me, I gotta see the best here is Bowser Jr. and the Koopalings Invade. Which is a heavy rearrangement of Super Mario Galaxy music. You know I love the Mario Galaxy soundtrack, so that's going to give it an advantage in this, and this track truly is great. Glazed Gardens, which pulls from Sweet Sweet Canyon from 8. And Royal Highway. Which works with N64 Yoshi Valley, are both worth a listen to. Now for my least favorite, I actually said that in my other video because there's not really many original tracks here, but it's still Freezy Frost. And the reason is that the original version of this, Wild Woods, is actually pretty good and fits its environment, but this just does not make any sense here, so that's why I'm going with it. And finally, we arrive at everyone's favorite $80 soundtrack, Mario Kart World. It's interesting because it has a comically large number of retro music tracks, but not in the same way as something like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. There's your normal retro race tracks, but then there's also the remixes and free roam, so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna choose a best and worst of retro tracks, and then a best of worst of the free roam remixes. It's also worth noting that there's different versions of these tunes since there are route versions and main versions, but I'm gonna group those all together. For the best retro track in World, I really love GameCube Peach Beach. Just super nostalgic for me, and it's also really relaxing without feeling slow. Just lowers my cortisol to listen to this. DS Airship Fortress is another fantastic one. My least favorite is DS Desert Hills Route. So I actually do like DS Desert Hills, but the route version is just so boring, and it's not even like all the route tunes are bad or something. Like, they aren't the best, but this one is just so boring and repeats the same couple of bars over and over again, and doesn't sound particularly good to listen to. Now for the remix free roam tracks, there's an unbelievable amount of bangers here. Legitimately, some of my favorite pieces in the entire Mario series came back to remix, so I'm gonna give a few honorable mentions, but pretty much every single track here is an honorable mention. Bowser's Highway Showdown from Super Mario 3D World. Super Bell Hill, also from Super Mario 3D World. Staff Roll from Super Mario 64. Please Select Player from Super Mario Bros. 2. Buoy Base Galaxy from Super Mario Galaxy. As for my favorite, I don't know, it's pretty much impossible to pick. I'll probably change it later, but I'm gonna go with Cloudy Core Galaxy from Mario Galaxy 2. So those are just a few. I probably could have like 20 other honorable mentions, but all I can recommend that you do is check out a playlist after, because this is a truly amazing soundtrack. And of course, we have to find a worst, and this was super difficult since these are all classics that were reworked, so there's not going to be any bad ones. Even SNES Ghost Valley is a lot better here, but it's still probably my least favorite here. I don't dislike it at all, surprisingly, even though I haven't liked it in the past, but I don't know what else I could have picked here. I'm also not the biggest fan of GameCube Dry Dry Desert. But I don't know, there's so many here, maybe I'm missing one. And that's my favorite and least favorite retro track in every Mario Kart game that has them. Now go check out these videos where I go over the best music in every Mario Kart game and the worst in every Mario Kart game. Plus I've done this for other series like Mario RPGs, Mainline Mario, Mario Party, and I'm working on some more, so be sure to subscribe, let me know your list, and come join my Discord. I'll see you next time.